KaraokeBooks.
In Search of Lost Time. Swann's Way. Marcel Proust. Translated by C.K.Scott-Moncrieff. At this moment the Princess des Lames, who had not been expected to appear at me de Saint-Euverte's that evening, did in fact arrive. To show that she did not wish any special attention, in a house to which she had come by an act of condescension, to be paid to her superior rank, she had entered the room with her arms pressed close to her sides, even when there was no crowd to be squeezed through, no one attempting to get past her, staying purposely at the back, with the air of being in her proper place, like a king who stands in the waiting procession at the doors of a theater where the management have not been warned of his coming, and strictly limiting her field of vision, so as not to seem to be advertising her presence and claiming the consideration that was her due, to the study of a pattern in the carpet or of her own skirt. She stood there on the spot which had struck her as the most modest, and from which, as she very well knew, a cry of rapture from me de Saint-Euverte would extricate her as soon as her presence there was noticed, next to me. De Cambremer, whom, however, she did not know. She observed the dumb show by which her neighbor was expressing her passion for music, but she refrained from copying it. This was not to say that, for once that she had consented to spend a few minutes in me de Saint-Euverte's house, the Princess des Lames would not have wished, so that the act of politeness to her hostess which she had performed by coming might, so to speak, count double, to show herself as friendly and obliging as possible. But she had a natural horror of what she called exaggerating, and always made a point of letting people see that she simply must not indulge in any display of emotion that was not in keeping with the tone of the circle in which she moved, although such displays never failed to make an impression upon her, by virtue of that spirit of imitation, akin to timidity, which is developed in the most self-confident persons, by contact with an unfamiliar environment, even though it be inferior to their own. She began to ask herself whether these gesticulations might not, perhaps, be a necessary concomitant of the piece of music that was being played, a piece which, it might be, was in a different category from all the music that she had ever heard before, and whether to abstain from them was not a sign of her own inability to understand the music, and of discourtesy towards the lady of the house. With the result that, in order to express by a compromise both of her contradictory inclinations in turn, at one moment she would merely straighten her shoulder straps or feel in her golden hair for the little balls of coral or of pink enamel, frosted with tiny diamonds, which formed its simple but effective ornament, studying, with a cold interest, her impassioned neighbor, while at another she would beat time for a few bars with her fan, but, so as not to forfeit her independence, she would beat a different time from the pianists. When he had finished the Liszt intermezzo and had begun a prelude by Chopin, de Cambremer turned to me de Franquetot with a tender smile, full of intimate reminiscence, as well as of satisfaction, that of a competent judge, with the performance. She had been taught in her girlhood to fondle and cherish those long-necked, sinuous creatures, the phrases of Chopin, so free, so flexible, so tactile, which begin by seeking their ultimate resting place somewhere beyond and far wide of the direction in which they started, the point which one might have expected them to reach, phrases which divert themselves in those fantastic by-paths only to return more deliberately, with a more premeditated reaction, with more precision, as on a crystal bowl which, if you strike it, will ring and throb until you cry aloud in anguish. To clutch at one's heart. Brought up in a provincial household with few friends or visitors, hardly ever invited to a ball, she had fuddled her mind, in the solitude of her old manor house, oversetting the pace, now crawling slow, now passionate, whirling, breathless, for all those imaginary waltzing couples, gathering them like flowers, leaving the ballroom for a moment to listen, where the wind sighed among the pine trees on the shore of the lake, and seeing of a sudden advancing towards her, more different from anything one had ever dreamed of than earthly lovers are, a slender young man, whose voice was resonant and strange and false, in white gloves. But nowadays the old-fashioned beauty of this music seemed to have become a trifle stale. Having forfeited, some years back, the esteem of really musical people. It had lost its distinction and its charm, and even those whose taste was frankly bad had ceased to find in it more than a moderate pleasure to which they hardly liked to confess. De Cambremer cast a furtive glance behind her. She knew that her young daughter-in-law, full of respect for her new and noble family, except in such matters as related to the intellect, upon which, having got as far as harmony and the Greek alphabet, she was specially enlightened, despised Chopin, and felt quite ill when she heard him played. But finding herself free from the scrutiny of this Wagnerian, who was sitting, at some distance, in a group of her own contemporaries, de Cambremer let herself drift upon a stream of exquisite memories and sensations. The Princess des Laumes was touched also. Though without any natural gift for music, she had received, some 15 years earlier, the instruction which a music mistress of the Faubourg Saint-Germain, a woman of genius who had been, towards the end of her life, reduced to penury, had started, at 70, to give to the daughters and granddaughters of her old pupils. This lady was now dead. But her method, an echo of her charming touch, came to life now and then in the fingers of her pupils, even of those who had been in other respects quite mediocre, had given up music, and hardly ever opened a piano. And so des Laumes could let her head sway to and fro, fully aware of the cause, with a perfect appreciation of the manner in which the pianist was rendering this prelude, since she knew it by heart. The closing notes of the phrase that he had begun sounded already on her lips. And she murmured, "How charming it is!" with a stress on the opening consonants of the adjective, a token of her refinement by which she felt her lips so romantically compressed, like the petals of a beautiful, budding flower, that she instinctively brought her eyes into harmony, illuminating them for a moment with a vague and sentimental gaze. Meanwhile de Gallardon had arrived at the point of saying to herself how annoying it was that she had so few opportunities of meeting the Princess des Laumes, for she meant to teach her a lesson by not acknowledging her bow. She did not know that her cousin was in the room. A movement of Franqueto's head disclosed the princess. At once de Gallardon dashed towards her, upsetting all her neighbors, although determined to preserve a distant and glacial manner which should remind everyone present that she had no desire to remain on friendly terms with a person in whose house one might find oneself, any day, cheek by jowl with the Princess Matilda, and to whom it was not her duty to make advances since she was not of her generation. She felt bound to modify this air of dignity and reserve by some non-committal remark which would justify her overture and would force the princess to engage in conversation. And so, when she reached her cousin, de Gallardon, with a stern countenance and one hand thrust out as though she were trying to force a card, began with, "How is your husband?" in the same anxious tone that she would have used if the prince had been seriously ill. The princess, breaking into a laugh which was one of her characteristics, and was intended at once to show the rest of an assembly that she was making fun of someone and also to enhance her own beauty by concentrating her features around her animated lips and sparkling eyes, answered, "Why, he's never been better in his life." And she went on laughing. De Gallardon then drew herself up and, chilling her expression still further, perhaps because she was still uneasy about the prince's health, said to her cousin, "Oriane." At once des Laumes looked with amused astonishment towards an invisible third, whom she seemed to call to witness that she had never authorized de Gallardon to use her Christian name. "I should be so pleased if you would look in, just for a minute, tomorrow evening, to hear a quintet, with the clarinet, by Mozart. I should like to have your opinion of it." She seemed not so much to be issuing an invitation as to be asking favor, and to want the princess's opinion of the Mozart quintet just as though it had been a dish invented by a new cook, whose talent it was most important that an epicure should come to judge. "But I know that quintet quite well. I can tell you now, that I adore it. You know, my husband isn't at all well, it's his liver. He would like so much to see you, de Gallardon resumed, making it now a corporal work of charity for the princess to appear at her party. The princess never liked to tell people that she would not go to their houses. Every day she would write to express her regret at having been kept away, by the sudden arrival of her husband's mother, by an invitation from his brother, by the opera, by some excursion to the country, from some party to which she had never for a moment dreamed of going. In this way she gave many people the satisfaction of feeling that she was on intimate terms with them, that she would gladly have come to their houses, and that she had been prevented from doing so only by some princely occurrence which they were flattered to find competing with their own humble entertainment. And then, as she belonged to that witty, Guermantes set, in which there survived something of the alert mentality, stripped of all commonplace phrases and conventional sentiments, which dated from Merimee, and found its final expression in the plays of Meylock and Halévy, she adapted its formula so as to suit even her social engagements, transposed it into the courtesy which was always struggling to be positive and precise, to approximate itself to the plain truth. She would never develop at any length to a hostess the expression of her anxiety to be present at her party. She found it more pleasant to disclose to her all the various little incidents on which it would depend whether it was or was not possible for her to come. "Listen, and I'll explain," she began to me. "De Gallardon. Tomorrow evening I must go to a friend of mine, who has been pestering me to fix a day for ages. If she takes us to the theater afterwards, then I can't possibly come to you, much as I should love to. But if we just stay in the house, I know there won't be anyone else there, so I can slip away. Tell me, have you seen your friend M. Swann?" "No. My precious Charles. I never knew he was here. Where is he? I must catch his eye. It's a funny thing that he should come to old St. Euverte's, me." De Gallardon went on. "Oh, I know he's very clever, meaning by that, very cunning, but that makes no difference. Fancy a Jew here, and she the sister and sister-in-law of 2 archbishops. I am ashamed to confess that I am not in the least shocked," said the Princess des Lames. "I know he's a converted Jew, and all that, and his parents and grandparents before him. But they do say that the converted ones are worse about their religion than the practicing ones, that it's all just a pretense. Is that true, do you think? I can throw no light at all on the matter." The pianist, who was down to play 2 pieces by Chopin, after finishing the prelude had at once attacked a polonaise. But once me. De Gallardon had informed her cousin that Swann was in the room. Chopin himself might have risen from the grave and played all his works in turn without me. Des Lames is paying him the slightest attention. She belonged to that one of the 2 divisions of the human race in which the untiring curiosity which the other half feels about the people whom it does not know is replaced by an unfailing interest in the people whom it does. As with many women of the Faubourg Saint-Germain, the presence, in any room in which she might find herself, of another member of her set, even although she had nothing in particular to say to him, would occupy her mind to the exclusion of every other consideration. From that moment, in the hope that Swann would catch sight of her, the princess could do nothing but, like a tame white mouse when a lump of sugar is put down before its nose and then taken away, turn her face, in which were crowded 1,000 signs of intimate connivance, none of them with the least relevance to the sentiment underlying Chopin's music, in the direction where Swann was, and, if he moved, divert accordingly the course of her magnetic smile. "Oriane, don't be angry with me," resumed me. De Gallardon, who could never restrain herself from sacrificing her highest social ambitions, in the hope that she might one day emerge into a light that would dazzle the world, to the immediate and secret satisfaction of saying something disagreeable. "People do say about your M. Swann that he's the sort of man one can't have in the house. Is that true?" "Why, you, of all people, ought to know that it's true," replied the Princess des Lames, "for you must have asked him 100 times, and he's never been to your house once." And leaving her cousin mortified afresh, she broke out again into a laugh which scandalized everyone who was trying to listen to the music, but attracted the attention of me. De Saint Euverte, who had stayed, out of politeness, near the piano, and caught sight of the princess now for the first time. Me. De Saint Euverte was all the more delighted to see me. Des Lambs, as she imagined her to be still at Guermantes, looking after her father-in-law, who was ill. "My dear princess, you here?" "Yes, I tucked myself away in a corner, and I've been hearing such lovely things." "What, you've been in the room quite a time?" "Oh, yes, quite a long time, which seemed very short. It was only long because I couldn't see you." "Me." De Saint Euverte offered her own chair to the princess, who declined it with, "Oh, please, no." "Why should you?" "It doesn't matter in the least where I sit." And deliberately picking out, so as the better to display the simplicity of a really great lady, a low seat without a back. "There now, that hassock, that's all I want. It will make me keep my back straight." "Oh. Good heavens, I'm making a noise again. They'll be telling you to have me chucked out." Meanwhile, the pianist having doubled his speed, the emotion of the music lovers was reaching its climax. A servant was handing refreshments about on a salver, and was making the spoons rattle, and, as on every other party night, De Saint Euverte was making signs to him, which he never saw, to leave the room. A recent bride, who had been told that a young woman ought never to appear bored, was smiling vigorously, trying to catch her hostess's eye so as to flash a token of her gratitude for the others having thought of her in connection with so delightful an entertainment. And yet, although she remained more calm than de Franquetot, it was not without some uneasiness that she followed the flying fingers. What alarmed her being not the pianist's fate but the piano's, on which a lighted candle, jumping at each fortissimo, threatened, if not to set its shade on fire, at least to spill wax upon the ebony. At last she could contain herself no longer, and, running up the 2 steps of the platform on which the piano stood, flung herself on the candle to adjust its sconce. But scarcely had her hand come within reach of it when, on a final chord, the piece finished, and the pianist rose to his feet. Nevertheless, the bold initiative shown by this young woman and the moment of blushing confusion between her and the pianist which resulted from it, produced an impression that was favorable on the whole. "Did you see what that girl did just now, princess?" asked General de Froberville, who had come up to me. Des Lambs as her hostess left her for a moment. "Odd, wasn't it? Is she one of the performers?" "No, she's a little De Cambremer," replied the princess carelessly, and then, with more animation, "I am only repeating what I heard just now, myself. I haven't the faintest notion who said it. It was someone behind me who said that they were neighbors of De Saint Euverte in the country, but I don't believe anyone knows them, really. They must be country cousins. By the way, I don't know whether you're particularly well up in the brilliant society which we see before us, because I've no idea who all these astonishing people can be. What do you suppose they do with themselves when they're not at De Saint Euverte's parties? She must have ordered them in with the musicians and the chairs and the food. Universal providers, you know. You must admit, they're rather splendid, General. But can she really have the courage to hire the same supers every week? It isn't possible." "Oh, but Cambremer is quite a good name, old too," protested the general. "I see no objection to its being old," the princess answered dryly, "but whatever else it is, it's not euphonious," she went on, isolating the word euphonious as though between inverted commas, little affectation to which the Guermantes set were addicted. "You think not, eh?" "She's a regular little peach, though," said the general, whose eyes never strayed from De Cambremer. "Don't you agree with me, princess? She thrusts herself forward too much, I think, in so young a woman. That's not very nice, for I don't suppose she's my generation," replied Des Lambs, the last word being common, it appeared, to Gallardon and Guermantes. And then, seeing that de Froberville was still gazing at De Cambremer, she added, half out of malice towards the lady, half wishing to oblige the general. "Not very nice. For her husband. I am sorry that I do not know her, since she seems to attract you so much. I might have introduced you to her," said the princess, who, if she had known the young woman, would most probably have done nothing of the sort. "And now I must say good night, because one of my friends is having a birthday party, and I must go and wish her many happy returns," she explained, modestly and with truth, reducing the fashionable gathering to which she was going to the simple proportions of a ceremony which would be boring in the extreme, but at which she was obliged to be present, and there would be something touching about her appearance. "Besides, I must pick up Basin. While I've been here, he's gone to see those friends of his. You know them too, I'm sure, who are called after a bridge. Oh, yes, the hyenas. It was a battle before it was a bridge, princess. It was a victory," said the general. "I mean to say, to an old soldier like me," he went on, wiping his monocle and replacing it, as though he were laying a fresh dressing on the raw wound underneath, while the princess instinctively looked away, "that empire nobility. Well, of course, it's not the same thing, but, after all, taking it as it is, it's very fine of its kind. They were people who really did fight like heroes." "But I have the deepest respect for heroes," the princess assented, though with a faint trace of irony. "If I don't go with Basin to see this Princess Diana, it isn't for that, at all. It's simply because I don't know them. Basin knows them, he worships them." "Oh, no, it's not what you think. He's not in love with her. I've nothing to set my face against. Besides, what good has it ever done when I have set my face against them?" she queried sadly, for the whole world knew that, ever since the day upon which the Prince des Lames had married his fascinating cousin, he had been consistently unfaithful to her. "Anyhow, it isn't that at all. They're people he has known for ever so long, they do him very well, and that suits me down to the ground. But I must tell you what he's told me about their house, it's quite enough. Can you imagine it? All their furniture is empire. But, my dear princess, that's only natural, it belonged to their grandparents. I don't quite say it didn't, but that doesn't make it any less ugly. I quite understand that people can't always have nice things, but at least they needn't have things that are merely grotesque. What do you say? I can think of nothing more devastating, more utterly smug than that hideous style. Cabinets covered all over with swans' heads, like bath taps. But I believe, all the same, that they've got some lovely things. Why, they must have that famous mosaic table on which the Treaty of... Oh, I don't deny, they may have things that are interesting enough from the historic point of view. But things like that can't, ever, be beautiful. Because they're simply horrible. I've got things like that myself, that came to Basin from the Montesquieu's. Only, they're up in the attics at Guermantes, where nobody ever sees them. But, after all, that's not the point. I would fly to see them, with Basin. I would even go to see them among all their sphinxes and brasses, if I knew them, but I don't know them. Do you know, I was always taught, when I was a little girl, that it was not polite to call on people one didn't know." She assumed a tone of childish gravity. "And so I am just doing what I was taught to do. Can't you see those good people, with a totally strange woman bursting into their house? Why, I might get a most hostile reception." And she coquettishly enhanced the charm of the smile which the idea had brought to her lips, by giving to her blue eyes, which were fixed on the general, a gentle, dreamy expression. "My dear princess, you know that they'd be simply wild with joy." "No, why?" she inquired, with the utmost vivacity, either so as to seem unaware that it would be because she was one of the first ladies in France, or so as to have the pleasure of hearing the general tell her so. "Why? How can you tell? Perhaps they would think it the most unpleasant thing that could possibly happen. I know nothing about them, but if they're anything like me, I find it quite boring enough to see the people I do know. I'm sure if I had to see people I didn't know as well, even if they had fought like heroes, I should go stark mad. Besides, except when it's an old friend like you, whom one knows quite apart from that, I'm not sure that heroism takes one very far in society. It's often quite boring enough to have to give a dinner party, but if one had to offer one's arm to Spartacus, to let him take one down. Really, no, it would never be Vercingetorix I should send for, to make a 14th. I feel sure, I should keep him for really big crushes. And as I never give any. Ah. Princess, it's easy to see you're not a Guermantes for nothing. You have your share of it, all right, the wit of the Guermantes. But people always talk about the wit of the Guermantes. I never could make out why. Do you really know any others who have it? She rallied him, with a rippling flow of laughter, her features concentrated, yoked to the service of her animation, her eyes sparkling, blazing with a radiant sunshine of gaiety which could be kindled only by such speeches, even if the princess had to make them herself, as were in praise of her wit or of her beauty. Look, there's Swann talking to your Cambramer woman, over there, beside old Saint Euverte, don't you see him? Ask him to introduce you. But hurry up, he seems to be just going. Did you notice how dreadfully ill he's looking? Asked the general. My precious Charles? Ah, he's coming at last. I was beginning to think he didn't want to see me. Swann was extremely fond of the Princess des Laumes, and the sight of her recalled to him Guermantes, a property close to Cambrai, and all that country which he so dearly loved and had ceased to visit, so as not to be separated from Odette. Slipping into the manner, half artistic, half amorous, with which he could always manage to amuse the princess. A manner which came to him quite naturally whenever he dipped for a moment into the old social atmosphere, and wishing also to express in words, for his own satisfaction, the longing that he felt for the country. Ah! He exclaimed, or rather intoned, in such a way as to be audible at once to me. De Saint Euverte, to whom he spoke, and to me. Des Laumes, for whom he was speaking, behold our charming princess. See, she has come up on purpose from Guermantes to hear Saint Francis preach to the birds, and has only just had time, like a dear little titmouse, to go and pick a few little hips and haws and put them in her hair. There are even some drops of dew upon them still, a little of the hoar frost which must be making the Duchess, down there, shiver. It is very pretty indeed, my dear princess. What? The princess came up on purpose from Guermantes? But that's too wonderful. I never knew. I'm quite bewildered, me. De Saint Euverte protested with quaint simplicity, being but little accustomed to Swann's way of speaking. And then, examining the princess's headdress, why, you're quite right, it is copied from. What shall I say, not chestnuts, no, oh, it's a delightful idea. But how can the princess have known what was going to be on my program? The musicians didn't tell me, even. Swann, who was accustomed, when he was with a woman whom he had kept up the habit of addressing in terms of gallantry, to pay her delicate compliments which most other people would not and need not understand, did not condescend to explain to me. De Saint Euverte that he had been speaking metaphorically. As for the princess, she was in fits of laughter, both because Swann's wit was highly appreciated by her set, and because she could never hear a compliment addressed to herself without finding it exquisitely subtle and irresistibly amusing. Indeed. I'm delighted, Charles, if my little hips and haws meet with your approval. But tell me, why did you bow to that Cambramer person? Are you also her neighbor in the country? Me. De Saint Euverte, seeing that the princess seemed quite happy talking to Swann, had drifted away. But you are, yourself, princess. I. Why, they must have countries everywhere, those creatures. Don't I wish I had? No, not the Cambremers, her own people. She was a Legrandin, and used to come to Cambrai. I don't know whether you are aware that you are Comtesse de Cambrai, and that the chapter owes you a due. I don't know what the chapter owes me, but I do know that I'm touched for 100 francs every year by the curé, which is a due that I could very well do without. But surely these Cambremers have rather a startling name. It ends just in time, but it ends badly, she said with a laugh. It begins no better. Swann took the point. Yes, that double abbreviation. Someone very angry and very proper who didn't dare to finish the first word. But since he couldn't stop himself beginning the second, he'd have done better to finish the first and be done with it. We are indulging in the most refined form of humor, my dear Charles, in the very best of taste. But how tiresome it is that I never see you now, she went on in a coaxing tone. I do so love talking to you. Just imagine, I could not make that idiot Froberval see that there was anything funny about the name Cambramer. Do agree that life is a dreadful business. It's only when I see you that I stop feeling bored. Which was probably not true. But Swann and the princess had the same way of looking at the little things of life, the effect, if not the cause of which was a close analogy between their modes of expression and even of pronunciation. This similarity was not striking because no two things could have been more unlike than their voices. But if one took the trouble to imagine Swann's utterances divested of the sonority that enwrapped them, of the mustache from under which they emerged, one found that they were the same phrases, the same inflections, that they had the tone of the Guermantes set. On important matters, Swann and the princess had not an idea in common. But since Swann had become so melancholy, and was always in that trembling condition which precedes a flood of tears, he had the same need to speak about his grief that a murderer has to tell someone about his crime. And when he heard the princess say that life was a dreadful business, he felt as much comforted as if she had spoken to him of Odette. Yes, life is a dreadful business. We must meet more often, my dear friend. What is so nice about you is that you are not cheerful. We could spend a most pleasant evening together. I'm sure we could. Why not come down to Guermantes? My mother-in-law would be wild with joy. It's supposed to be very ugly down there, but I must say, I find the neighborhood not at all unattractive. I have a horror of picturesque spots. I know it well, it's delightful, replied Swann. It's almost too beautiful, too much alive for me just at present. It's a country to be happy in. It's perhaps because I have lived there, but things there speak to me so. As soon as a breath of wind gets up, and the cornfields begin to stir, I feel that someone is going to appear suddenly, that I am going to hear some news. And those little houses by the water's edge. I should be quite wretched. Oh. My dearest Charles, do take care, there's that appalling Rampelon woman. She's seen me. Hide me somewhere, do tell me again, quickly, what it was that happened to her. I get so mixed up. She's just married off her daughter, or her lover, I never can remember, perhaps both, to each other. Oh, no, I remember now, she's been dropped by her prince. Pretend to be talking, so that the poor old Berenice shan't come and invite me to dinner. Anyhow, I'm going. Listen, my dearest Charles, now that I have seen you, once in a blue moon, won't you let me carry you off and take you to the Princess de Parme's, who would be so pleased to see you, you know, and Basin too, for that matter. He's meeting me there. If one didn't get news of you, sometimes, from Meme. Remember, I never see you at all now. Swann declined. Having told M. de Charles that, on leaving me, de Saint Euvert's, he would go straight home, he did not care to run the risk, by going on now to the Princess de Parme's, of missing a message which he had, all the time, been hoping to see brought in to him by one of the footmen, during the party, and which he was perhaps going to find left with his own porter, at home. Poor Swann, said me. De Lams that night to her husband, he is always charming, but he does look so dreadfully unhappy. You will see for yourself, for he has promised to dine with us one of these days. I do feel that it's really absurd that a man of his intelligence should let himself be made to suffer by a creature of that kind, who isn't even interesting, for they tell me, she's an absolute idiot. She concluded with the wisdom invariably shown by people who, not being in love themselves, feel that a clever man ought to be unhappy only about such persons as are worth his while. Which is rather like being astonished that anyone should condescend to die of cholera at the bidding of so insignificant a creature as the common bacillus. Swann now wished to go home, but, just as he was making his escape, General de Froberval caught him and asked for an introduction to me. De Cambramer, and he was obliged to go back into the room to look for her. I say, Swann, I'd rather be married to that little woman than killed by savages, what do you say? The words, killed by savages, pierced Swann's aching heart, and at once he felt the need of continuing the conversation. Ah, he began, some fine lives have been lost in that way. There was, you remember, that explorer whose remains Dumont d'Urville brought back, Le Perros. and he was at once happy again, as though he had named Odette. He was a fine character, and interests me very much, does Le Perrouse, he ended sadly. Oh, yes, of course, Le Perrouse, said the general. It's quite a well-known name. There's a street called that. Do you know anyone in the Rue Le Perrouse? Asked Swann excitedly. Only me. De Chanlevault, the sister of that good fellow Chaussepierre. She gave a most amusing theater party the other evening. That's a house that will be really smart someday, you'll see. Oh, so she lives in the Rue Le Perrouse. It's attractive. I like that street, it's so somber. Indeed it isn't. You can't have been in it for a long time. It's not at all somber now. They're beginning to build all round there. When Swann did finally introduce M. de Froberville to the young me. De Cambremer, since it was the first time that she had heard the general's name, she hastily outlined upon her lips the smile of joy and surprise with which she would have greeted him if she had never, in the whole of her life, heard anything else. For, as she did not yet know all the friends of her new family, whenever anyone was presented to her, she assumed that he must be one of them, and thinking that she would show her tact by appearing to have heard such a lot about him, since her marriage, she would hold out her hand with an air of hesitation which was meant as a proof at once of the inculcated reserve which she had to overcome and of the spontaneous friendliness which successfully overcame it. And so her parents-in-law, whom she still regarded as the most eminent pair in France, declared that she was an angel. All the more that they preferred to appear, in marrying her to their son, to have yielded to the attraction rather of her natural charm than of her considerable fortune. It's easy to see that you're a musician heart and soul, madam, said the general, alluding to the incident of the candle. Meanwhile the concert had begun again, and Swann saw that he could not now go before the end of the new number. He suffered greatly from being shut up among all these people whose stupidity and absurdities wounded him all the more cruelly since, being ignorant of his love, incapable, had they known of it, of taking any interest, or of doing more than smile at it as at some childish joke, or deplore it as an act of insanity, they made it appear to him in the aspect of a subjective state which existed for himself alone, whose reality there was nothing external to confirm. He suffered overwhelmingly, to the point at which even the sound of the instruments made him want to cry, from having to prolong his exile in this place to which Odette would never come, in which nothing was aware of her existence, from which she was entirely absent. But suddenly it was as though she had entered, and this apparition tore him with such anguish that his hand rose impulsively to his heart. What had happened was that the violin had risen to a series of high notes, on which it rested as though expecting something, an expectancy which it prolonged without ceasing to hold on to the notes, in the exaltation with which it already saw the expected object approaching, and with a desperate effort to continue until its arrival, to welcome it before itself expired, to keep the way open for a moment longer, with all its remaining strength, that the stranger might enter in, as one holds a door open that would otherwise automatically close. And before Swann had had time to understand what was happening, to think. It is the little phrase from Vinteuil's sonata. I mustn't listen. All his memories of the days when Odette had been in love with him, which he had succeeded, up till that evening, in keeping invisible in the depths of his being, deceived by this sudden reflection of a season of love, whose sun, they supposed, had dawned again, had awakened from their slumber, had taken wing and risen to sing maddeningly in his ears, without pity for his present desolation, the forgotten strains of happiness.
If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the channel.